We can get some more reaction to what is unfolding this morning. Joining me, Ryan Shorthouse, former Tory advisor, but he's also founder and CEO of the Bright Blue Conservative think tank. Ryan, good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. What are you making about the public numbers at the moment? As it stands publicly, Rishi Sunak, we could have a coronation here this afternoon rather than a contest.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of Tory MPs are now supporting Rishi Sunak. Penny Mordaunt is holding on, but to be honest, if she does continue, does make the 100 names, which I think is unlikely, but if she does do, then we'll be going into a contest where the majority of MPs are supporting Sunak, and there's a danger that the members vote for Penny Mordaunt, and then there is a real split between the membership and the parliamentary party. I think at the end of the day, the parliamentary party want unity now. They're very concerned about the volatility in the financial markets. Rishi Sunak is somebody who has obviously been Chancellor, dealt with the very huge economic impact during the COVID crisis, and also won the argument during the summer leadership contest, which is if you have unfunded tax cuts, which Liz Truss then pursued, it would spook the markets and you would see the cost of borrowing both for government and for households go up, which is what's happened.
I'm just hearing word from Penny Mordaunt's campaign, Ryan Shorthouse, a former Tory advisor, that Penny Mordaunt has now passed 90 backers. She's got until 2 o'clock to reach that magic number of 100, but that's just an update we're getting for the Penny Mordaunt campaign. Penny Mordaunt on 90, as we've been reporting, Rishi Sunak on 183. The public backing chasm is quite clear, but we will see at 2 o'clock. Let's just talk about two words we've been repeating here on Sky News, and so many people have. Unity, that's one thing that Rishi Sunak has to deal with in his party, but also the economy. Just how bad a position is he inheriting if he is the new Prime Minister later on this afternoon?
Well, it's a very difficult situation. There's lots of volatility in the markets. The markets are clearly wanting government to get a grip of the budget deficit, which, as Jeremy Hunt, the current Chancellor, has said, you need to have some tax rises and some spending cuts. So we are going into another period of austerity, perhaps not as deep as what we saw post-2010, but it will be very difficult. And yes, even with a new leader, I think households will look at their mortgages, which have gone up by several hundreds of pounds in parts of London and the South East, definitely thousands of pounds more as a result of increased mortgage rates. And they will remember, even 2 years hence, when we have a possible election, that it was the Tories that led to an increase in those mortgage rates. So I think it's going to be very difficult for a new leader to govern, particularly considering the economic circumstances. I think they're very limited in what they can do. We saw that from Liz Truss. If she tried something bold, she was the markets were spooked and the parliamentary party moved against her. So it would be very hard for a new leader to do anything bold economically, but also I think politically. The Conservative Party, is incredibly divided, not only between members and parliamentarians, but within the parliamentary bloc as well. So I think it's going to be very difficult for a new leader to do anything substantial or new. The best really that they can hope for is to calm the markets and get some more economic stability. That's really what the aim of the new Prime Minister should be, and that's really what they'll be expected to do.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky situation for the new Prime Minister, whether they are announced today or on Friday, because on Monday you have the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, standing up and delivering the Conservative Party's fiscal plans. If it's Rishi Sunak today, he is a former Chancellor. Surely he'll want to look at those plans and, he might make some changes. We don't know. Penny Mordaunt may be the same. It's quite a tricky situation. What would you advise them in that scenario? Because obviously they'll have certain views. The Chancellor has set out his stall accordingly and plans to go ahead on Monday. Could there be changes? Could it be postponed, for example?
I think it's likely to be postponed to give the new PM some time to look at the finances, the public finances. But I think there is no other alternative to the fiscal strategy that now needs to be pursued to calm the markets and reassure markets and investors that the UK has a grip on the deficit and its public finances. And so really it will need to be a combination of tax rises and spending cuts. In the last round of austerity, immediately after the financial crisis in 2008 and in the 2010s, really the focus was disproportionately on spending cuts. I don't think there's the political the political space to do that in terms of public spending cuts this time. There will be some, but I think tax is going to have to play a much bigger role. So, for example, I think you'll see some fiscal drag, so i.e. the current rate in which basic rate and higher rate tax starts will be frozen for many, many years. So that means, particularly with wage inflation, many more people will be paying higher tax bands because they'll move into those higher tax bands as a result of their wages going up. I think also the government really needs to seriously look at wealth taxation as well. I'm thinking on pensions and on housing. It needs to look at that because I think there's also a need, particularly since the pandemic, to try and maintain people in their 50s and 60s in the labour market. They're leaving in rapid numbers, and actually a part of that is to do with taxation that you get on work as opposed to wealth. They need to be lowering on work and increasing it on wealth generally. And then in terms of spending cuts, we're going to see those. I think most departments have been asked to look at, 4% or so across the board. So there are going to be some painful measures on spending that we're going to see. But I think really government, first and foremost, should be looking at central government departments, their headcounts, the contracts that they have, arm's length bodies. I think they will be the first things that central government are looking for spending cuts. But like I say, I don't think that will be enough on itself. So you will have to look at deeper spending cuts to public services, but also for tax to do more of the role this time in balancing the public finances.
I just want to update viewers. 186 public declarations of support Rishi Sunak now has from Conservative MPs. Penny Mordaunt, we now understand, has the support of over 90 MPs. That's from her campaign a few minutes ago. She just needs 10 more to get that to that magic number of 100 to get on the ballot paper that will be announced at 2 o'clock this afternoon here on Sky News. Just a final question, Ryan, if I may. Talk of a general election. Still calls for it today, regardless of who becomes the new incumbent here at number 10. Boris Johnson backing Sir Christopher Chope called for a general election, saying Rishi Sunak has no mandate and will face continuing rebellions. He says we have a parliamentary party that is completely riven and ungovernable. Chris Bryant, the Labour MP, Labour, we know, calling for a general election now. He said if Rishi Sunak becomes Prime Minister without a single interview or smidgen of scrutiny, let alone a public vote, the British electoral system will look no more democratic than a banana republic. He will have no mandate, and that is disgraceful. That kind of talk is going to follow Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt into that door at number 10, isn't it?
Yes, the calls for that will intensify. But in a parliamentary democracy, there's no need, there's no sort of requirement to have another election because MPs are voted by their constituents, and then those MPs decide on their leader.
People argue that there is a moral need. There is a moral need for a general election.
There will be those calls, but like I say, it's not necessary. And a lot of Tory MPs look at the poll ratings at the moment, and it's in dire straits. So for them to, and they have a majority of around 80 in the House of Commons, for them to accept a general election, which they will need to do, it will be, for many of them, self-annihilation. So I think it's very unlikely that will happen.
Isn't that the problem, though? Because the public are watching this and going, the Conservatives are doing this to stay in power. They're not thinking about the people. That's the message we keep hearing from voters that we talk to here on Sky News when we're out and about up and down the country. It's the Conservative Party trying to save its own neck rather than thinking about what's in the interest of the people. The people have had since 2019 to look at what's going on and want another say.
Well, two arguments about that. The first is, I think because of the financial volatility that we've seen, I think there is a need for stability. And I think that's a genuine reason that a lot of Conservative MPs would say, let's have somebody like Rishi Sunak in and let's have that new Prime Minister in place for several years. We need that stability. But secondly, I mean, you sort of say it's as a criticism that the Tories are trying to cling on to power, but any party would do that, if they can. That's just politics. Like if you passionately believe in your policy agenda, you're going to try and maintain power for as long as possible. And if you have the legitimacy to do that,
even if it tanked the economy,
they do. Well, if it, I think I agree with you, which is that it's going to be
all the things you listed: mortgage payments going up, cost of living, all of that. Even if that's the case, it's still the right thing to do.
Well, I don't necessarily think that that will be solved by a general election. The key is, do we have can a new Prime Minister command a majority of the House of Commons to get legislation through? I agree with you that that's going to be very difficult for the new Prime Minister to do, and therefore they'll be very limited in terms of the economic and political policies that they can pursue. So, the rule is, can a new Prime Minister command the majority of the House of Commons? If not, then, perhaps a new election needs to be called. But I think as a result of that, Rishi Sunak will be very conservative with a small c and timid in his policy making, and his entire focus will be about calming the financial markets and trying to restore economic stability. But, I get that many people are angry with what's happening with the Conservative Party and their approach to the economy at the moment. So, as I say, there will be more calls for an election. And if the Conservative Party does become ungovernable, as some Tory MPs think it should, or think it will do, then it will be very difficult for the new Prime Minister. But I am sensing from Tory MPs the need to have unity, and that's why you're seeing a lot of people who backed Boris, very big supporters of Boris, come over to Rishi and say, let's have unity, not only for the sake of the Conservative Party, but for the for the public generally, and to calm the financial markets.
Ryan Shorthouse, former Conservative advisor and founder and CEO of Bright Blue, the Conservative think tank. Thank you for your time here on Sky News this morning. Thank you.